Hi there, Alison here with another Cab Franc du jour. Today we are in Saumur-Champigny and we're looking at the Domaine des Closiers 2020 Les Closiers Saumur-Champigny. Located in the commune of Parnay, Domaine des Closiers is an historic domain in Saumur-Champigny that has existed for several generations. Many centuries ago, the word closier was the name given to the vignerons that worked the land and resided in the troglodyte dwellings that were dug out of the tuffeau chalk. The modern story of the domain begins in 2018 when the estate was purchased by Epérnay-native Anatole de la Brosse. An oenologist by training, Anatole had a successful career as a management consultant before he chose the path of the vine. The estate is comprised of around 15 hectares of vines, of which about 14 of those are Cabernet Franc, and their parcels are predominantly in the commune of Parnay with a few parcels in neighboring Souzay-Champigny and Turquant. Under the direction of renowned viticulturalist Michel Chervé, the Domaine began organic conversion in 2020. And in the cellar, Anatole is guided by longtime friend Nady Foucault. The estate is currently producing 3 Cabernet Francs. 2 of these are cuvées parcellaires, les Coutrailles and Trésalières. And then we have the Domaine wine, les Closiers, and this is coming from multiple parcels. And there's also a 4th Cabernet Franc, and this is also a cuvée parcellaire, and this is coming from the most enchanting little clos called Baie Rouge. And the first vintage of this wine was in 2020, and it's still aging in barrel, and it has yet to be released. So today we're looking at the Domaine wine, which is Les Closiers, and this is coming from around 8 hectares of vines with the parcels predominantly in Parnay. And this gives me the perfect opportunity to give everyone a bit of an overview of this commune. So the commune of Parnay is one of the 6 communes in Saumur-Champigny that hugs the bank of the Loire River. And it's bordered to the east by the commune of Turquant and bordered to the west by the commune of Souzay-Champigny. And the viticultural area in this commune begins right at the edge of the Tuffeau Plateau on the south side of the Loire River. And it's concentrated in an area that is about 2.5 kilometers from north to south and just a little over 1.5 kilometers from east to west. And unlike some of the other communes in Saumur-Champigny, where there is a certain degree of homogeneity to the terroirs, the commune of Parnay and its viticultural areas are a little bit more difficult to define and summarize. The topography across this commune is quite varied, and as a result we have a wide variety of vineyard exposures as well as elevations, and this has exposed a labyrinth of soils over time. In the northern part of the commune, the majority of the vineyards are perched atop the limestone plateau. And here we're at elevations of around 55 to 65 meters above sea level. And here we will find either the upper Turonian or the middle Turonian tuffeau chalk, depending on where you are. The topsoils as well will all generally have a little bit more clay in them, and the topsoils tend to be a little bit more shallow as well. Also in the northern part of the commune here, most of the vineyards will have a slightly north-facing exposure. In the central and southern part of the commune, there's this forested area that sits at a higher elevation, and this forested area surrounds the viticultural area in a bit of a U shape. And this means that the vineyards in this part of the commune will have a little bit more protection from the wind. There'll also be a bit more enhanced biodiversity in this area as well. These vineyards are at a higher elevation, around 70 to upwards to 90 meters above sea level. And then in terms of soils, we find quite the patchwork of soils in terms of origin, and there's soils that date to the Cenobian age as well as the Eocene epoch. And then in terms of topsoil, we have quite the patchwork of topsoils as well. There is one section in this part of the commune where we see a lot more sand in the topsoil, but we also have parcels that have a bit more clay and a bit more silt as well. Also in the central and southern part of the commune, we have a bit more stoniness in the topsoil, and the topsoils overall tend to be a little bit deeper as well. In terms of exposures in this part of the commune, because of this forested area, the vineyards can have any number of exposures, and the exposure will likely depend on where that vineyard is positioned relative to the forests. And when I had a chance to visit the Domaine in February, Anatole and I took a bit of a drive through the commune to see the parcels, and this southern part of the commune was quite magical. There was a really special energy to it, and I don't really know how to describe it, but you're sitting up at a higher elevation here, you're surrounded by trees, you can hear the birds singing, so there's a certain connectedness to nature. This is where the parcels for les cuvées are located, and on top of all of this, you're sitting at a higher elevation, so you've got this beautiful view of the northern part of the commune of Parnay, and yeah, it was just a really special area, and from this vantage point I could get a real sense of what Parnay was all about. So looking at this wine a little bit closer, as I said, it's coming from around 8 hectares of vines from multiple lieux-dits. So there are 4 lieux-dits that are located in Parnay, and then there's a small lieu-dit that is located in Turquant. The vines are on average around 35 or so years of age. And in terms of soils, we're dealing with predominantly like a fine clay topsoil that's more shallow, so about 30 to 50 centimeters of topsoil. And this is sitting atop the Middle-Tronian tuffeau chalk bedrock. And then in terms of these parcels and their overall sort of commonality between these parcels is they all tend to have a bit more of a north-facing exposure. And Anatole explained to me that this is actually advantageous because these parcels will ripen a little bit more slowly, more gradually. So come time for harvest, the phenolic maturity of the grapes aligns really well with the technical maturity. So we have fruit that has balanced acidities and sugars, and then they also achieve good ripeness of the polyphenols. From a winemaking perspective, the fruit for this wine is all hand harvested. It's sorted 3 times and then it is destemmed. And then the fruit will undergo a cold soak for about 10 days before alcoholic fermentation kicks off. And alcoholic fermentation is in stainless steel with indigenous yeast, and Anatole is very careful to ensure that the fermentation temperature never exceeds 20 degrees Celsius. The time on skins is around 30 days, and the approach to maceration here is through infusion. So just with the odd occasional pump over, gentle pump over to just ensure that the cap stays wet. And then once the post-fermentation maceration is complete, the free-run wine is drained off the skins. The skins are very gently pressed, so very little pressed wine comes out of the skins. So depending on the vintage, this will or may not have any pressed wine in it. So we're dealing with mostly free-run wine here. In the event that there is a bit of pressed wine, that is then blended with the free-run wine, and then the cuvée is aged in stainless steel for about 8 to 10 months before it is then bottled. So let's dive into this wine. So the nose is really lovely. It leads with fruit first, and we're talking red fruits, predominantly sweet fruits, beautifully fresh as well, as if you were literally just kind of reaching to the tree or the bush to pick the fruit at like optimal ripeness off the bush or the tree. I'm getting a lovely mix of, there's some cherry here, there's a bit of raspberry, there's a touch of pomegranate as well. There's a little bit of a wild blueberry note too. And I love how the fruits are leading here. The pyrazines are taking a back seat, but there is this wonderful herbal energy to the wine. And the herbs are coming through for me as like thyme. There's a touch of sage here as well. There's a bit of like a cedar leaf note too. There's a lovely floral undertone, not too pronounced on the florals, but there is a lovely purple flower note, which for me is coming through like lilacs. But in general, the nose is really inviting. It's pure. It's got a real sense of clarity to the nose and some beautiful freshness as well. On the palate, those same red fruits come through really beautifully, and then it's supported by a little bit more earthiness on the palate, which I really like. So those herbal notes are coming through. And then there's a lot of intrigue here. There's a lot of depth to this wine. So we're getting into some other complexities here, like a little bit of like cured tobacco. There's a bit of licorice here as well. I get a little bit of that, as wine nerds say, wet stones as well. There's also a lovely spice profile to the palate, which is this warming spice, very delicate. It's almost like allspice, maybe even a little bit of like star anise as well. This wine is magnificent. So in terms of the acidity is really energetic. it's persistent, it's lively. And then the tannins for me are really, really special in this wine and is really defining the character in this wine. So the tannins have a fine texture. There is a firmness to the tannins for sure, but what is interesting about the tannins is there is like a spherical nature to the tannins. Like I can almost visualize like a sphere. So there's a roundness to the tannins, which provides this sense of continuity, this sense of fluidity with the wine, this continuum with the wine, which is really, really lovely. It almost gives the wine a certain buoyancy because of how those tannins just kind of keep rolling with the fruit and with the acid and keep that momentum going. The tannins finish with a lovely crushed velvet texture, but the tannins are just, they're really quite beautifully managed here. The way that the fruit is enveloping those tannins is absolutely gorgeous. And in terms of the overall profile of the wine, you know, it's medium bodied. There's a lovely fruit core to the middle palate, which is nice. And, you know, this wine is all about effortlessness. It's about pleasure. There's an ease about this wine as well, which is really lovely. Structurally, you know, there is structure here. There is plenty acid. There's plenty concentration and depth and tannin here to age this wine for a bit. You know, it is the estate's early drinking cuvée, but this is something I think that will definitely improve with a little bit of time in the bottle. But the overall profile of this wine, this is about sophistication. This is about grace. This is about poise. And like I said, it is effortless. It is seamless. There's no hard edges here whatsoever. It just brings a lot of joy in that way. And there's something about this wine that I remember when I had it the first time a few months ago, that as soon as you put the wine in your mouth, like I had this emotional response where my brain was immediately like, oh, this is serious. This is the real deal. You are in for a treat here, because there was just this something that captured my attention instantly with this wine. And what's interesting about it too, though, as much as it immediately captures your attention, it doesn't demand too much of your attention either. So it's the sort of wine that you can kind of be contemplative with it if you want to, but at the same time, it doesn't have to be that way. And for me, some of my favorite Cabernet Francs that I've ever had, my like the best Cabernet Francs I've ever had, are those wines that do this wonderful dance between capturing your attention and kind of engaging with you, but at the same time, they have that ease, that relaxed approachability to them that doesn't demand too much of your attention either. And this wine is really doing that, and it's a really, really special cuvée. I can't stress that enough. And you know, I visited the Domaine back in February. I tasted the wine several months ago, and I was immediately impressed by the quality and the caliber of these wines. And I recognize that that it's early days here for Domaine des Closiers, with Anatole now in charge of things and running the show. But I gotta say, you know, the future is bright here for this domain, and I am extremely excited by what is to come for this estate and the wines. And they're really beautiful. And like I said, it's just early days, but there is a lot of good to come with this wine in the years and decades ahead. If you're not familiar with these wines, these are ones to put on your shopping list if you do happen to see them out in the wild. But like I said, I think these are definitely ones for your radar to keep an eye on, because I think this estate is only going to get better and better and better from here. And possibly these wines actually may become a bit difficult to snatch up in the near future. So if you come across them, do give these ones a try, because I assure you these are really spectacular wines. If you've had the wines from Domaine des Closiers, let me know what you found of them in the comments below. And of course, as always, I will be back again soon with another wine. Cheers.